G'day folks, Mark here. Yes, today I've got a video on something that is, rarely taught. It's something that a lot of people would know instinctively. It's certainly something that's how I learned how to do what I'm talking about. I think it's something that's generally not taught because it doesn't really run into in normal ranges and normal setups of long-range shooting, precision shooting. But it's actually about, for want of a better word, it's your shooting platform. And I'm not talking about your rifle, I'm talking about what you are shooting in a prone format, largely is what we're talking about, but the ground you're shooting on. And I suppose this also kind of talk is about whatever the form of shooting is, whether that's bench shooting or it's tripod shooting or whatever form of shooting it is, shooting off a rock, shooting off whatever. And what I'm alluding to with not saying whatsoever is the angle of your overall platform to your target. And as much as generally at ranges and at most places that you'll go and learn how to do this sort of stuff, or I think in most people's head is it's all on the same platform. It's all on the same elevation. It's all the same altitude. So largely it works fine because of that. Where in most cases, in reality, where there was, particularly with ELR, but even once you go past 200 yards, in a lot of places all over the world, you have to shoot either down or up. And that's actually quite a big deal for consistency and for accuracy and for learning how to set up a shot properly. So I'll go into that a tiny bit. Accuracy is about consistency. Down to the thou, or down to the nanometer, and down to the nanosecond and milliseconds, that sort of stuff. It's down to that level of consistency is where true accuracy comes from. Now, whether that's the load and how the load works, or the bullet, or the barrel, or the action of the rifle, or the action of the shooter, or the trigger pull, or all the details, the consistency is where accuracy comes from. If you can be consistent in every shot, to the nanosecond and to the nanometer or to the thou, to where everything stays exactly the same, then that bullet, by and large, is going to go to exactly the same place. Even with a less than perfectly consistent load, it'll still go largely to the same place, but a perfectly consistent load will even make that more so. But consistency. And that's something I need you to keep in mind when I move into this angle thing. If you're shooting from a flat platform, and we'll go prone, that's the most obvious place to look at it. So then you set up. Now there's different ways to set up for prone shooting. There's people who want to be close to the ground, have their chests on the ground. There's people that need their legs spread wide apart and their ankles there, their heels down, and there's all sorts of ways to shoot. I shoot in a different fashion. I get the chest up and I get the elbow platform and a bit more structure, bits and pieces, but there's various ways of doing that, and you're all trying to gain comfort and consistency into lesser or greater levels. But let's say we're ignoring all that and we're just going a platform which is flat. You're shooting out flat, then it's nice and consistent. The rifle's going to behave, whether it's sitting on a rest or it's sitting on a bipod or whatever it's sitting, it's going to behave. As long as you do your job properly and you set up properly, it's going to behave consistently. The moment your target's elevated or lower in elevation, all of a sudden your rifle, and I'll start to do some images here, all of a sudden your rifle either has to go up or it has to go down. In both cases, what has to happen to go up, you either need very long bipod legs, and then with the right sort of rest and thing, you'll be able to get to a similar place on your shoulder, but you'll find that then your body is not straight behind your rifle. In an elevation sense, it's then pushing down on your shoulder when you fire. So you've just lost some consistency there, regardless of the fact that you also, whatever you've done to elevate the bipod, the front of the rifle, that is not going to behave as the same way as it did behave when it was down flat. Or the other way, when you're shooting downhill. And then all of a sudden you have to then lower the bipod a long way down, or raise the butt pad up is the normal way to do it, is raise the butt pad up and get your shoulder up. And once again, it's not pushing straight on, it's lifting you up. These are situations where the bit that I came to mind is the thing that I do in the field all the time. When I set up, when I've got a very long shot and I need more elevation, I generally am shooting across a valley, so I can get a long way without having to shoot. I'm not shooting up into a mountain or down into a valley. I'm shooting across a valley. So largely I've only got 100 feet difference between my elevation and the shot elevation. Now 100 feet's a long way. If you're only shooting 200 meters, that's a fair old drop. But when you are shooting 3,000 meters or 2,000 meters even, that's not much of a drop. So it's a very little angle. It means you really can, with the elevation of the rifle, to be able to shoot out there, you get back to where you're shooting with a rifle with a nice, straight, consistent platform. But in most cases, people are shooting all sorts of things, but once you go to ELR particularly, or most long range, so really in most ranges, getting out past 600 yards is pretty tricky in large parts of the world. So to go further, and even that might be too much for some, to go further, they tend to be shooting up into the foot of the mountains or into the hills, that sort of thing. So they're shooting up. And they're shooting up in the 5 or 6 or 10 or 15 degrees in the way of elevation up. Now, for those people who think shooting uphill is harder because you've got gravity against you, no, that's not how gravity works. It's a second per second force, and gravity doesn't resist a bullet more because it's shooting slightly upwards. Basically, I won't get into it. I've got videos on that, but that's not a problem actually. That's not the hard bit of the shot. Shooting up a 100 meters into the air is not difficult because of the shot, but it does become difficult if your platform is not pointing at it. If your platform wants to be shooting dead at the same level as you, so it's on that flat angle, and your target's up here, then you need to contort yourself. It's harder on the body, it's harder on everything to do that sort of thing, to pull off that sort of shot. So then becoming more consistent, not only are the angles different, but the comfort level is lower, so you become less consistent. The shot becomes harder because of that. The simple thing to do it, and the way I do it, which is where I started a little while ago, is I will kick the dirt around. I'll do exactly what I could do in the field. And sometimes, yeah, that might take 15 minutes or even half an hour of kicking out an area so my feet can get lower. I've got the shot here on our really long shot where we need a fair bit of elevation, shooting 5Ks and we're running over 300 minutes of elevation. We need a fair bit of the rifle poking up. So the way I did that was found a place where there was a fallen log, filled the dirt behind the fallen log and made myself a little ramp. Dig in there where my feet get down, so made a little ramp. Very much something I could do with kicking the dirt around. Something I could do in the field for an ELR shot, something you're going to take the time to set up. If you're not going to pull it off. But no constructing ramps or things like that. Just kick dirt around so I get everything in about the right angle. Stomp around it, and that's what we did. That's how we did that shot. I've done the same thing in the 4K shots where I'm shooting from the top of a hill up here. Once again, not too much more. That was probably about 15 minutes of just kicking the gravel out of the road and pushing it from one end to the other end to give myself just a little bit of a ramp to be able to lay down on over that time. And that's all about getting basically the angle of the rifle, because this isn't just the elevation of the shot, this is the angle of the rifle I need for the shot, to be very, very similar to the angle of the ground. So there my body is in about the right place. You'll notice in the opposite side of things, in the 600 yards, the last one I didn't do it properly with was when I was shooting the 505 Gibbs in the ELR rifle, shooting downhill at 600 yards. 600 yards to really 1500 yards is a little bit awkward for the position where I shoot. I don't shoot too much of it. We have to in the winter time because when the crops are growing. But that is the valley area for us. That was the closest, highest area I could find, and we have there about the biggest angle we shoot down at. I'll have to put the specs on there, I can't remember exactly, but it's well down. The way I do that, where I can, and I need the grass cleaned because we basically get to the point where I push the shooting position forward on the little knoll we're on, so we're further down. So I'm trying to get that same thing, trying to get the rifle position straight, my body position pretty straight in angle to the target. Not an angle to horizontal, but an angle to the target. Yes, that's less comfortable, being down that sort of angle, having your head down, that sort of stuff, but it's not terrible and it makes everything perform properly. As you'll see from other groups we shoot there, very consistent, but that's all about actually pushing forward and getting that, the platform that we're shooting from level. The next level I would say is that there's places we're prone doesn't work. Could do other ways. In a bench setup, in a custom bench setup, you could raise or lower that, so then you sit behind it and then you raise or lower the angle of the rifle so that then it can shoot with that nice consistent form by raising or lowering a bench. Not something I've really tried. There would be other issues with making the rifle sit there once you got too much angle, but it would be something that would give you back that consistency in shooting in an elevated form. I tend to, as you've seen, when I've got to shoot uphill in places where I'm on ground that's largely soaking downhill, I don't do it. I switch over to a tripod. And yes, it's harder to hold consistently on the tripod, and yes, you've got to make everything work properly. To make a tripod, it simply is not going to be as accurate as a really good bench rest setup or a really good prone system, because you don't have quite as much control. But you can get pretty close, and then all of a sudden you've got a lot more elevation. By raising things up, you can get to that rifle where it's working on you properly, you can get to where you're shooting properly. You have to do the body position side of things, but you are asking a very similar thing out of your shoulder to rock back rather than your whole body behind it, your shoulders rocking back, so you can deal with a lot more angle. But the trick is, and I suppose where I wanted to get it to, was that angle, that the platform, the ground, the bench, the concrete slab, the whatever it is, to get the best consistent shooting, you should be making sure that it is angled to your target. It is basically in line with the elevation of your target. And that may mean for some rangers that are trying to do the other side of things, where they've got their lovely concrete pad, it works beautifully, all that's really great, and they've got these other targets to shoot at. It's not a bad thing to learn to try and do that sort of stuff, but if you actually are in elevation, and I haven't been around the world enough to see what people do, I'm sure that there are some ranges set up like this already. It is really, once you understand it, it's common sense, but like most common sense, it's only common once you figured it out, or maybe it isn't that common. But if you get that angle going on to where that works, then you'll get a lot more comfort. Then all of a sudden, that neck pain, that body pain, that lower back pain that people get into when they're trying to do too much of being a banana to try and shoot a rifle that's ramped up, because you don't have that long range area, the targets need to go up on the hill, and you have they're down the valley, that type of thing, and then there's all these bits and pieces. The fundamentals of it come back to trying to be as consistent as possible. And that prone way of shooting, that is very much about having everything in line. The moment you have that banana thing going, or that hump thing going on, you've lost some consistency. Some people, no doubt, can do that really well and make their own consistency in that place. But for most people, and if you're out in the field and that sort of stuff, that flat bit of dirt that's like this isn't as convenient as that bit of dirt that's pointing at target, or that getting behind a log that's actually pointing at target and getting to that place. Sure, a lot of people fully realize this already, but it's not something I ever heard explained properly. And whether I've done it properly, I don't know, but I hope I got across my point. It is something that matters. It is something that will make it easier to do this sort of stuff, make it more comfortable to do this stuff, and out of that, you're going to find it'll be more accurate to do this stuff as well. Anyway, guys, that's my little chat on that one there. Hope it made some sense. Leave all your comments down below and your experiences down below. Thank you very much for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.